Welcome back to Truth Hurts, where we expose corrupt politicians lying corporate media. I'm Jake Duesenberg, your host, broadcasting live from Roseville in Minnesota. Roseville, Minnesota, the belly of the beast, the liberal zombie apocalypse of the Minneapolis-St. Paul Twin Cities area. I got a really interesting show for you, really good guest today. We're going to talk about Ukraine. We left on Friday, so this is after our last show. And are they even labeling what this Oval Office meeting was with Zelensky? Is there a big name? Is like
they've been calling it a shouting match. That's what I've been seeing the leftist media calling this.
Okay, well, and yeah, of course they're all on the side of Zelensky, you know, and Trump is pro-Putin, right? That's how we look at things these days. Anyhow, what are we going to be talking about today, Mega Jesse?
Yeah, we got a lot of good stuff to be getting into because obviously this Trump-Zelensky meeting was groundbreaking, and it proved that Trump was fighting for peace. So we will be breaking down what exactly happened at that meeting. We are going to be we're lucky enough to be joined by Scott Horton, who is going to join us to discuss the Ukrainian war insanity, and he's an expert on this topic, and we're blessed to be able to have him as a guest. We will also be discussing back to Minnesota politics, what has gone on in the Minnesota legislature, where all of the Republicans refused to vote for the Never Again bill when they had every opportunity to do so on the floor. We'll be discussing all of the topics surrounding that idea. We will also be discussing Walter Hudson, who has decided to go unhinged. Cultist Walter Hudson drinking the red Kool-Aid. So we'll be breaking down his video because obviously he's telling lots of lies about Action for Liberty. It's funny because he used to be one of us, but it seems that things change once you get into office. I see that we got Mary Kay, Cindy Lou, Tucker91, Billy22, Chad Weber, Napkin 8, and Napkin 8 in the comments on Rumble. So appreciate all you guys tuning in. Make sure to leave a Rumble rant if you want to make sure you got a question, and if you want to make sure we get to a topic.
All right,
so thank you guys for tuning in.
Today's episode is brought to you by Warren Westhoff, Keller Williams Realty. If you're looking to buy a home or sell a home, give my good friend Warren a call at 612-419-7453. And if you're looking to buy a home, give the good guys at John Galt Mortgage a chance to finance that home. You can go to johngaltmortgage.com. You can also check out their excellent meme game on Facebook and Twitter. They remind me to tell you they're not a fake company. They're a real company. They do finance homes. They just happen to have a great name and a great meme game. So check them out on social media or go to johngaltmortgage.com. We're also brought to you by Alpine Cabinetry in St. Cloud, Minnesota. Today's guest is Scott Horton. He's the director of the Libertarian Institute, the editorial director at antiwar.com, which is a great resource. I've been going to that website for, it seems like, probably well over a decade. Also the author of a new book called Provoked. And let me get the other part of the title because I don't remember that by heart. How Washington Started the New Cold War with Russia and the Catastrophe in Ukraine. Let me start with this here real quick. We're going to cue up the A1. This is what America politics was like a year ago. Go ahead and play this video. This was on the U.S. House floor after they sent your money to Ukraine.
On this vote, the ayes are 311 and the nays are 112. The bill is passed. Oh, one voting present. I missed it, but thank you.
And there you see the Democrats on the left side of the House floor waving a foreign flag. By the way, they've had Zelensky speak in front of the U.S. Congress. Go ahead and cut it there, Dustin. Speaking in front of the U.S. Congress many times, telling us why we need to send your hard-earned money. Actually, it's really not even your hard-earned money. They're going to print the money. They're basically going to issue government debt, and they're going to print that money to buy up that debt, which only makes your children more burdened by debt. Like, because Ukraine's so important. So then we fast forward to it's not yesterday, Friday in the Oval Office. And here's a clip from what went down with Donald Trump and Zelensky.
Trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's exactly what you're doing.
You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
Feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
And if you haven't seen the whole video, you guys can go check it out. It's also on my X account. That is the tone of the meeting in the last, I think it was 10 minutes. Before then, Trump, I thought, was very reserved. So, Scott, I want to bring you in. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm told by the mainstream media and the Washington establishment that you're either for Zelensky and the people of Ukraine, or you are pro-Putin. You're just a Russian propagandist. And, you know, the funny thing is, I don't think Putin is a great guy. I think he's a terrible guy. I think he's wrong for invading Ukraine. But I also think that Zelensky is corrupt and that it's a money laundering scam over in Ukraine. And we have no vital American interest in Ukraine, and we shouldn't be sending our blood and our treasure over there. Where do I go wrong with that viewpoint?
I agree with you 100%. The only thing is you left out how this is all America's fault in the first place. And not that I'm saying that that means that we owe them to continue to back them in this war, but this never would have happened if all of the previous governments going back to the end of the last Cold War had not insisted on this policy of maintaining American dominance, not only in Europe, but even in Eastern Europe, and expanding the NATO military alliance right up to Russia's borders, and consistently threatening since W. Bush to bring Ukraine in as well. And I think they saw their opportunity with, I think they were out of patience for the ongoing civil war in the East. That was the result of the Obama and Biden coup of 2014, or overthrow, I guess, of 2014. And then also the renewed promises to expand the NATO alliance to include them. And at the same time, even though they weren't moving that fast on that, they were expanding what was called the interoperability of Ukraine's military with ours. In other words, giving them as much as possible NATO standard ammunition and weapons and communication systems and command and control, hierarchies and all the rest of the things to integrate their military with the United States and with the NATO military alliance as much as possible without giving them the war guarantee that NATO membership includes. And so, as many scholars said at the time, this is really the worst of all worlds. It's America saying, you and him fight, and we'll give you some weapons and we'll help you some, but we know you're going to lose. But we hope you get some good licks in on the other guy because we hate him.
Right.
And what the hell kind of an irresponsible foreign policy is this for America to have? And then, of course, Joe Biden is just the quintessence of the American empire, this doddering, old, half insane, completely bankrupt and illiterate warmonger / idiot, right? Goofball. No idea what to do. Can't even speak in real terms about what's happening. Has to continue changing the subject to Neville Chamberlain and Adolf Hitler 80 years ago because he can't even articulate what's actually happening in the situation that he's got us into. So the whole thing, and that's why I call it a catastrophe in Ukraine. It's not just a slaughter. This whole thing is, blowing up everybody's interests all the way around.
What was Biden's policy? I almost feel like they don't want to say this, but they kind of do say it seemed like, that it's literally to starve the beast, the biggest enemy. They were told that Vladimir Putin, Russia, is the biggest enemy to America, and their policy is just to starve the beast so that they're less powerful for an inevitable future war with America. I mean, is there another policy that they had other than that, even though they don't want to say that? But that seems to be what it is. And of course, that's going to result in millions dying in Ukraine.
Yeah. Well, look, I think, okay, even if you go back to W. Bush and Barack Obama, remember when Obama and Hillary Clinton first came in 2009, they tried to do the so-called reset to try to get along with Russia, and they were the ones who blew it, as I demonstrate in the book. They had their chance. But if there is, deep strategy behind this, essentially what it is that the American foreign policy establishment in total considers China to be the looming threat for the rest of the century. And so the question is what to do then about Russia, just as it was in the days of the old Cold War, where Henry Kissinger and Richard Nixon made an alliance with Mao's China, an informal one, but still with Mao's China to split them away from the Soviet Union, to split the smaller partner away from the larger one. And in this case, they're essentially divided. Some of them have wanted to essentially cozy up to Russia and coax Russia into integrating more with the Western system. But see, the problem is they're the ones contradicting themselves. They'll never truly let Russia into the European Union or NATO. Those things are, at the end of the day, still at Russia's expense. So there's a hard break on how well they can ever integrate Russia into the West, but the point being to split them off from China. But then you have people like Joe Biden and his staff, or I don't know what Biden thought about anything, but his staff like Jake Sullivan and Antony Blinken, they're thinking, as represented by another major faction of the foreign policy establishment, is, well, in order to weaken China, instead of cozying up to Russia and wooing them west, we'll just bog them down in a conflict in Eastern Europe and weaken them so that in any conflict with China, Russia won't be any use to China. So this is all stupid. And see, and I especially encourage your MAGA audience to listen very, very close to the very good things that Donald Trump says when he's not contradicting himself, because he does talk about things like, we don't need to have a major power competition with Russia or China. We can get along just fine with all the major powers of the earth. We don't need this constant state of militarism. You know, there's this great economist named David Stockman, who was Ronald Reagan's budget director. He's a really great capitalist and economist and historian and writer and pundit, and he's really great. And he calls the entire American military establishment post-World War II the Great Deformation. Now, you could argue whether it was necessary or not to stave off the Soviet Union, but those days are dead and gone. And that all came to an end on Christmas Day, 1991. And so what Stockman argues is the entire American empire should have come home from Europe, the Middle East, and East Asia then. And the truth is, if you take the globe, just like Bill Hicks said, also back 30 years ago, spin the globe. There are no enemies. There are no major powers of the earth. We're friends with everybody in Europe and could be with Russia. We're essentially at most economic competitors, but we're really friends with China. India has no major power. There is no major power in the Middle East or in Africa or in Latin America for us to deal with ever. We have no enemies in the world. And Donald Trump acknowledges this. You know, so much of, speaking of the American foreign policy establishment, they say it's time to switch from terrorism to major power competition. But maybe it's time to switch from all of these things to peace and liberty and capitalism and prosperity.
And trade.
And security here in America.
And trade, right? We can
That's
trade
right.
with other
America
countries.
First. That's right. And look, Donald Trump is a bit protectionist, and I don't agree with his tariffs, although we'll see how all that shakes out. He's essentially, I don't know what his long-term policy is. Right now, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. He's trying to cut some deals with some of those tariffs, but I'm for free trade, and I'm essentially a Ron Paul guy, and that means that, like Thomas Jefferson said, we want peace, commerce, and honest friendship with all nations of the earth, and entangling alliances with none. We want revolution in one country, ours. And we have our Declaration of Independence, and we have our Constitution. That's what we should be striving to protect. And you can see how tenuous liberty is. You can see how quickly it can be taken away.
Well, look at COVID, right? I mean, that should have been a wake-up call for everybody.
That's right. And look, why do we even have this behemoth in Washington that even thought that they could dictate to us? It's because of the world empire, right? Controlling the world means we have to have an internal empire also based in Washington in order to control us so thoroughly, more than any other thing, to make us pay for the cost of their world empire overseas. You know, they don't take much in tribute from the conquered vassals. Essentially, the American taxpayer, we're the ones who have to pay tribute to the empire as they conquer the rest of the world. And it's totally unfair, and any American could see it now. You were so right to begin this, just talking about the money. This is, you know, there was an old saying in Washington, a billion here, a billion there. Pretty soon you're talking about real money. Yeah, well, you'd have to be a politician to talk about it like that. I mean, he was joking, of course, but from the point of view of the average American, $1 billion? Imagine what you could do for your county with $1 billion. Imagine where that billion came from in the first place. Your county. And they just pissed that away in 10 seconds time. Meanwhile, the people of North Carolina still don't have shelter. The people of Maui and the people of LA, who've all been burned out of their homes, are stuck with a check for $700 and a good luck.
Or the government doesn't take it in the first place and it stays with us, our family, which right now, by the way, life is becoming less affordable because of the inflationary policies of Washington, the Federal Reserve. We got a Rumble rant. It looks like a question for Scott, so let's go ahead and read
we got a $5 Rumble rant. G. Ballstat asks, what events do the left and State Department point to when claiming Russia invaded Ukraine, and why is that incorrect? Thanks. So, Scott, I guess the question is, What is the State Department and left? What are they arguing about the beginning of the war, and what is the truth of the matter?
Yeah. Okay. Well, they certainly did invade in 2022. No question about that. If you want to go back to 2014, I mean, the truth is the war started then, and it was Obama and Biden, John Brennan, who started it, and they overthrew the government there. And they insisted, after the Russians took Crimea, they insisted that the new regime launch a war against the people of the East who were essentially refusing to accept the rule of the new junta. And so that makes what happened in February of 2022, at least, somewhat fuzzy. It's, I'm not excusing it at all. I agree with the other host here said that, absolutely it was the wrong thing for him to do it. It was an invasion. He escalated, he escalated the war by 100,000%, where it had been this low-level slog from the time that Minsk II or Minsk I and Minsk II deals were signed in the fall of 2014 and in the early winter of 2015 there. And so, I agree with them that it was wrong for Russia to do that. In my speeches and so forth, my best analogy essentially is that America put Putin's back to the wall. Joe Biden did, put his back to the wall, and he decided not to let himself get boxed all the way in a corner. He decided to go ahead and fight now, which is the kind of thing a guy like him might like to do. But I would point out that, again, the whole foreign policy establishment knew better than to do this in the first place. Oh, sorry, not again. That was the last interview. The whole foreign policy knew better than to do this in the first place. And one of the wisest people who weren't against it back in 1997 was George Kennan. And he had actually helped to coin the containment policy against the Soviet Union back in the 40s. But in 97, he said, listen, by expanding NATO and making Russia still the object of it, even after the fall of the Soviet Union, the way that we are doing, we are making them an enemy, and we are guaranteeing a negative reaction from Russia. And he said, all of the NATO expanders now who say, don't worry, it'll be fine, the Russians won't mind, or whatever their excuse is, then they will say, see, that's just how Russia is, and that's why we need the NATO alliance. So in other words, he's saying this is a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're making an enemy out of Russia, and then once they turn enemy, you're going to say, see, they're our enemy, and that's why we have to do the things that we're doing. But so everybody should just go back and remember who was at step one. The Soviet Union fell apart. The people who ruled Russia at that time were the people who had heroically overthrown the communists and should have been our friends. And we're essentially kicking dirt in their face and being a bad sport and guaranteeing a negative reaction.
Yeah, Scott, you and I have a similar background. I was a delegate for Ron Paul in 2012. Prior to that, I was an Army officer deployed to Kosovo during their unilateral independence, which America cited, and NATO cited. By the way, on our base in Camp Bondsteel was Ukrainian soldiers, just FYI, although they weren't part of NATO, but they were part of NATO, against the Russian-backed Serbia. And we allowed during 2000, was it beginning of 08, 07? I'm already forgetting. Allowed unilateral declaration of independence by Kosovo, which would have been southern Serbia at that time.
Oh, wait.
So, I mean, like, and by the way, this is what drove me to Ron Paul on top of the Fed and the problems with monetary policy was the fact that I lived it. And then Iraq after that, by the way, deployment. It's like I lived it. I saw the stupidity of this policy. I still remember, because we had to respond to the backlash of the independence, a billboard in the northern part of Kosovo with Vladimir Putin on it, right? Because they were pro-Russian. It's like we've been doing this for some time. So from my understanding of history is there was assurance that NATO would never expand east of Germany after the fall of the Soviet Union. Well, fast forward to 2007, and here we are in Kosovo with NATO forces. To me, that seems to be the biggest provocation of war. Not that I'm justifying what Vladimir Putin has done, right? It certainly wasn't the last straw, so he's wrong for doing that. But it's not like we're some innocent party that didn't provoke this. Where am I wrong on that?
No, you're not wrong. That's exactly the case that I make in my book. It's not called Justified and Good Job, Russia. It's called Provoked. Because what did they say? They said it was an unprovoked attack, an unprovoked attack, an unprovoked attack. Well, come on. Doesn't that sound like somebody's guilty conscience talking? Why do they name it that? You know what I mean? Like, you have to call it unprovoked. You're trying to, it's like it's baked into the thing. They might as well call it the "don't ask us how we provoked this attack." It's so obvious right in the name of the thing that they're trying to hide their role in making this happen.
Well, clearly he's on the payroll of the Kremlin. I mean, Jesse, there's no way he's thinking freely on his own here. He's just, these are pro-Putin talking points. How dare you, Scott Horton?
Yeah, that's all they ever say.
Here's
actual reasonable argument, right?
I know, right? And you're an American and a Texan, right? Which really makes you an American, or makes you really a Texan, right?
That's true.
Okay, so one of the reasons I wanted to do this show, mostly because Minnesota politics got so absolutely boring here in the last couple of weeks. Although Tim Walz says he wants to run for president in 2028, or says he's open to it. So,
be kidding.
Yeah, well, I would say it was all a joke, but we lived.
Laugh this afternoon, buddy. I appreciate that.
Yes, I know. I said, do it. All right, so. You know, I've chatted with my brother, who's generally on the same side of politics as me. He seems to see things in the eyes of a Ukrainian person, which I understand. I think there's a rational reason why you would look differently on Trump's performance on Friday if you're coming from that perspective. But I can't place myself in a Ukrainian's perspective in this case in politics, because it's our blood, it's our treasure. Luckily, it's not blood at this point, at least that we understand, but it's our treasure going over. So first of all, that I have a huge problem with, especially when we're $2 trillion added to the debt every year. But the second one is the blowback of this policy. I mean, I think we made so many mistakes in the Middle East in the last 20 years. We made big mistakes in Afghanistan, but that pales in comparison to a mistake against the largest nuclear power in the world. It's insane. Right. So make the argument to these people who I mean, obviously the left, I almost just got to ignore the people on the left, because they've lost their minds. I remember an anti-war left. You know, I've been in this politics for over 20 years. I remember that. But the people that maybe are sympathetic to Trump but don't see it eye to eye with us, make this argument to them why we have to look at this in America's interest.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, first of all, look at the Ukrainians' interest, right? Again, we got them into a fight that they can't win.
That's a good point.
They're losing more and more guys, more and more money, more and more territory every day. Their cities, as Donald Trump has correctly said, are being smashed to smithereens. I mean, there are entire cities in the east of Ukraine that are just going to have to be completely bulldozed and rebuilt if they're to be ever saved at all. I mean, it is absolutely just catastrophic. Just the intensity of the warfare over there. It's like World War I plus drones, right? Fighting in freezing mud, in trenches with tank and artillery rounds blowing up all around you, plus drones dropping grenades on your head, or, you know, hunting you down and getting you in the back. It's an absolute nightmare of a conflict over there. And the Ukrainians cannot win it. No matter how many weapons we give them or what weapon systems we give them these kinds of tanks, we give them these kinds of rocket systems and missiles, we give them all the intelligence, and, you know, we have special operations forces and CIA and contractors on the ground helping them use these weapons and picking targets for them, you know, running tabletop exercises in Germany, trying to figure out what are all the best things that they can do in all the battles, helping them run the whole war, and they can't win it. And so what happens is they lose more and more guys and more territory all the time. And so the only solution
can I stop you there for a second?
Sure.
Dan Crenshaw tells me something different.
Well, yeah, but he's just wrong, right? Like,
right?
Okay,
right?
He didn't say this, but let me be charitable to him for a moment. He maybe just couldn't remember the name of the place or something, so he didn't bother to spit out that there are Ukrainians in Kursk, inside Russia itself, right now. But they're way out in the country, and they're mostly being ignored, and it was apparently an attempt to try to convince the Russians to pull some troops out of Ukraine and move them there. And they said, no, we'll just remove them slowly, whatever it takes, but we're going to stay on the offensive in the east. So it was a gamble by Ukraine to do that, but it doesn't change anything really in terms of the situation in the war, or how much territory they've already lost, or who has the momentum on the ground. There's just no question that time is on Russia's side here in this conflict. It always has been, and especially since even the fall of 2022 was the last time that the Ukrainians made any significant progress against This is just a few months into the war, right? In September of 22 was the last time that they made any significant progress against the Russians. It's been all downhill since then. And everybody understands that Britain and France and Germany ain't coming, and Poland, they're not all going to combine into a new land army and go in there and reverse this. And if they did, that would be risking nuclear war. Or we could also send in the 82nd Airborne and the 3rd Infantry Division, the U.S. Marine Corps and the U.S. Navy and Air Force to go in there. They could reverse it, but that, again, would lead to a nuclear war. And so, as you said, we're spending all this money, but luckily no American blood yet. But it's absolute horror show on the ground for the Ukrainians, and the blood being risked by our government and the previous administration in getting us into this, and by the Europeans who are still pretending that they're talking tough here and want to intervene in the war somehow, is the destruction of our entire civilization, the death of every important American city, and a bunch of survivors who wish they died in the first place. We would lose 100 million or 200 million people on the first day. 60 million people, the number of people who died in the Second World War would be killed within the first 45 minutes or hour of a thermonuclear war with Russia. We would essentially lose all of northern civilization. America and Europe and Russia would all be completely wiped out.
Even if they didn't go to that measure, putting the 3rd Infantry Division, the 82nd Airborne on the ground, that comes with massive costs to American troops. They're not going to go there unscathed, right? This isn't Gulf War I. And that's so right. That alone is a terrible policy. But this is where I'm going with this is I feel like the left, the media, the Washington establishment, I Patch McCain and all, are living this delusion, and some of them have to know this is a delusion, that there's some way Ukraine can win this war without us deploying the 82nd Airborne. Like,
right. I think
and that doesn't exist.
Not true. They must know that that's not true, but they just don't want you talking that way. I had this debate with Wesley Clark. I mean, imagine little old me debating a 4-star general, the guy who ran the Kosovo War in 1999 for Bill Clinton. And I made him admit it, and he finally did admit it, that yes, it's true that Ukraine cannot win. Their situation is only getting worse all the time, the longer they stay in the war. But we shouldn't be talking like that, young man, because, that, sacrifices our great position when we try to negotiate. But, and this was funny because this is J.D. Vance got into a Twitter argument with Richard Hanania last week about this. It was the exact same conversation that, you know what, I'm pretty sure the Russians know where their soldiers are and at what rate they're killing and dying. And they don't need to learn that from me. And it's ridiculous to say that we could, like, what, you're going to send Antony Blinken? Not that he would ever sit and negotiate with the Russians, but that would be the idea. You would send him or Rubio or someone else in there to sit down with Sergei Lavrov and lie to him and tell him, come on, Sergei, everybody knows you guys are losing and we're in the ones in the position of strength, so you better do what we say. No, that's completely laughable and stupid. So what's their argument? They don't have one. You see, and it's like a gift to me, I guess, that it's Bill Kristol and David Frum and all of these absolute idiots who've been wrong about everything, who all say the same thing. It's the big stab in the back with no explanation of how we're supposed to turn it around for the Ukrainians in any other context.
Yeah, and that's the extent of their brain power, the people that have been running foreign policy since, well, I'm sure we could go back to Clinton, but certainly George W. Bush when we became the country of endless wars. All right. First of all, I watched that debate with Wesley Clark. That was one of your better ones because it was just you two. I think you guys briefly interacted on a previous panel with Piers Morgan. I can't stand the fact that Piers Morgan puts you on a panel with a bunch of other people that, quite frankly, don't even belong there, and you get very little time to talk about it. So in that case, you were bouncing off each other, and it was a very good dialogue, in my opinion. I'm torn on this, Scott, because I love watching you on Piers Morgan, but at the same point, it's the wrong format for you. But do what you're going to do anyhow. They've learned
the lesson that they always make sure that I go last because I'm going to not stop talking.
Yeah, I know. And then it's really funny to watch how frustrated you get by these people. But some of the things that they're saying is so absurd. And of course, one of them is, well, two of the big ones is like, oh, you're pro-Putin because you actually can think for yourself as an American. And number two is the fact that there's any chance Ukraine can win this war, which is just so utterly stupid. Okay, so here's the question I have for you. And I agree with you, obviously, with your book. By the way, for people that don't know, what's so interesting about his book, and if you're like me, you're not going to go to the front first because, boy, you don't have that much time. He starts, I think it was with George H., right? Or was it Reagan?
Yeah.
It was
H.W. Bush,
okay,
the end of the Reagan years, but yeah.
Yeah, so he's going by presidential terms to get to where we are in the modern day. What a great book. I thought it was relevant in December, and now it's really relevant. So I agree with you on this. I think Trump's made some errors in a lot of things, but I was just so excited to see what he did on Friday. It's not, I was explaining this to my brother. We got into the stupid debate about what he was wearing at the Oval Office, okay? And I said to him, it's not so much that he wasn't wearing a suit. I just don't care. I don't dress up. I used to wear a suit when I was in finance. It is what it is. The problem that I have with the fatigues and the stuff that he wears is I see it as a show. It's a show. It's a big show that we need to be pro-Ukraine to the point where Congress is holding up little mini Ukrainian flags. And I am sick of the show. And on this show, that's why I got Mega Jesse. He balances me out because I've been very critical of Donald Trump on this. I'm very libertarian. And I ended up voting for Trump because I made I guess I hoped that Trump would actually do something the second time. I hope his explanation was he wasn't a Washington guy. He had the wrong guys in front of him the first time. So I made that leap of faith. And so far, I could pick little things here and there. I've been relatively surprised. And it really came to fruition on Friday when he basically said the things that I've been thinking and a lot of people have been thinking for some time now. Now, that was just one day, one little 10-minute spiel. Where does Trump go from now on? In your mind, the best thing he could do going forward in terms of Ukraine?
Well, look, I'm just for total non-interventionism. I ultimately think that it's not really the role of America to tell Ukraine what they have to do, other than with the weapons we give them. But otherwise, I think, no, America should simply leave and leave it up to them to sign their own peace deal with Russia on their own terms. Donald Trump could just reverse all of Biden's sanctions and all the rest of that and just declare that he hereby normalizes relations with Russia. There's no reason. We don't even need to negotiate that. He could just do that himself. And, what happened in the Oval Office there was, it was ridiculous. It was amazing to sit and watch the guy try to talk over Trump.
Yeah.
To disrespect him like that and all of that stuff. But focus in, though, on what it was that when the argument broke out. I mean, they've been sitting there talking for 30 or 40 minutes before he really went after Vance. Well, what had happened was Vance was saying we have to negotiate an end to this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And he interrupts and essentially says, how do you negotiate with a guy who breaks deals? Putin is insatiable and he'll never stop until he's defeated. And once we defeat him with your help, then you can give us a war guarantee so he never comes back again. But essentially implying, but you're a damn fool if you think that you can get him to just make an agreement on paper and then stick to that. And so that was where Vance said to him, all due respect, I'm completely astonished that you would try to litigate this in front of the press here in public and contradict me or contradict the president sitting here in the Oval Office on camera rather than having this discussion. Now, they should have had all this hashed out behind the scenes first. Typically, that's how these things work is, we have a mineral deal here, we have a potential ceasefire deal here, and then we have the makings of whatever security guarantees they're going to discuss or whatever it is, hopefully none. But Trump and Vance made it clear. They want a ceasefire. They didn't make it clear, but they heavily implied they accept Russian gains on the ground as irreversible, and they don't want to fight about that. They just want an end to the war and a ceasefire and to normalize relations and move forward from there. And Zelensky, apparently, I don't think this was just him blowing his top, right? I think what happened was he made a strategic calculation here that America's throwing him overboard. He's if he's going to get any more money and weapons from us, it ain't going to be much. And that he doesn't want to quit the war now. I think he stupidly believes, I don't know what he thinks is going to happen in the future, but he seems to be betting on the Europeans coming with money and weapons and potentially even soldiers to try to help him in the war.
But if that's a result, then good for us in America, right? Even though I want the bloodshed
they're not
to
going to
end,
do
but
that.
far better.
Yeah, no, I mean, Britain, France, Germany, and Poland combined don't have a big enough army to actually field in Ukraine and fight Russia with.
Right,
Now,
right.
they can stay home and they could keep Russia out of their own countries, no problem, in a conventional fight. But they don't have the manpower or the resources or the money or the logistics or anything like that to wage a war against Russia through Ukraine without America running it all for them, and they know it. And so they're not really in a position to give him what he wants. So I think, at best, he's a damn fool for not saying, at least in private to Trump that, look, whatever, get me the best deal that you can get me.
Right.
But that's in the position. He's lost the war.
Right.
I don't know if this really is part of his calculation or not, but I can report to you that Nazis have threatened to blow his head off or hang him from a tree numerous times in the past if he would dare make a deal with Russia.
Mhm.
And that was back before the worst part of the war. That was when he was first elected in 2019 and shortly after that, where they said, listen, if he makes peace with Russia, then that is sacrificing all of the losses in the war so far. It's throwing them away on the sunk cost fallacy, the way they used to talk about Iraq. And we can't leave now because what about the guys we already got killed for nothing? They had to have been killed for something, and whatever it is, we'll find out at the end of the war, right? And so that's kind of what they're saying here, and that he would be dishonoring the sacrifice of the men who've already died. And so, and they've just made it clear they'll blow his head off.
So Ukrainian Nazis
One
and
of their
Senate
guys tried to
Democrats.
kill Trump, remember?
Right. Ukrainian Nazis and Senate Democrats are aligned that he should not take Trump's deal. Interesting stuff. Let's go to, we only have them for a couple more minutes. Let's go back to that Rumble rant.
Yeah, we got another Rumble rant asking who controls U.S. foreign policy on Palestine, whether that be Benjamin Netanyahu or Trump. And he also asks whether or not you think troops will be deployed to the Greater Israel Project.
Oh, taking us off mark here on
Right.
Ukraine, but that's fair. You paid for the Rumble rant. Let's go ahead, because I know Scott Horton speaks truth on that issue too.
Yeah, no, it's very important. I mean, to boil it down, Miriam Adelson calls the shots, but who's she? She's Netanyahu's guy. She's an Israeli American who married an American Jewish billionaire casino mogul from Macau, and who launders his billions into the Republican Party to keep him good and Zionist. And I think Trump, I read a thing one time that Trump always looked up to Adelson as a gambling casino business guy, that this is like the cream of the crop, and he always hoped to fit in with a guy like him kind of deal, in status in terms of casino moguls. But Sheldon Adelson has said his only regret of life was that he joined the U.S. Army instead of the IDF, and had demanded that Barack Obama nuke Iran in order to set an example for them that they better not try to make a nuke, or that's what it's going to look like when we kill them all. And he had said over and over again that he has one and only political interest, and that is Israel. And so he gave $100 million to Donald Trump all 3 cycles. Well, he's dead now, so his wife, his widow, took care of it the last time around. All 3 cycles, they've written him a check for $100 million. And you might even remember that Donald Trump actually had on Twitter and in public had criticized Marco Rubio for taking Sheldon Adelson's money, and says Sheldon Adelson thinks he can just buy Marco Rubio and make him his perfect little puppet, which is true. Well, who's the Secretary of State now? Adelson's perfect little puppet. And Donald Trump took that money, and as we can see, and as we all know about Donald Trump, he's a transactional guy. They didn't just give him this money in the hope that he would think of them when Israel issues come up. They've got a deal, and I presume, I don't know this for certain, but I don't presume it. It's been widely reported in the Israeli press that the deal was for the West Bank. That I guess at some point in the next term that they will annex the West Bank and attempt to cleanse the Palestinians out of there, as they've been doing in Gaza. And you might remember that the last time he was president, and he stated this, I don't remember the exact words, but essentially he made it clear that it was for the money. It was a transactional thing. He got all this money from the Adelsons, and so this is what I do for you. And what it was he let them convince him. He even said, yeah, it took 5 minutes, which means 3. And they explained that Israel stole the Golan Heights in 1967 and they want to keep them. And he said, all right, fine, I hereby recognize Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights. And then they said, as Clinton, Bush, and Obama had all promised to do, he went ahead and moved the embassy to Jerusalem. Now, that's important because the Israelis claim all of Jerusalem as the eternal, undivided capital of Israel. And so by America moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, it's essentially recognizing that, even though half the city is still occupied or not occupied, but lived in by the Palestinians. And in the peace deals, they were supposed to get East Jerusalem to be the capital of the Palestinian state on the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, which, of course, Likud policy is to deny them hell or high water. And so by doing this, they're essentially kicking them, even in the future tense, the possibility of them making East Jerusalem the capital of their state. They say now you'll have to settle for this little suburb called, I think it's called Abu Dif, which is this little suburb east of East Jerusalem, where they're supposed to make their new government someday, which will never come anyway, I guess. And then he did these Abraham Accords, where he bribed the Sunni kings with American tax dollars and weapons to recognize Israel, even without them making peace with the Palestinians, which they had always held out for. So they weren't really, the Abraham Accords weren't really peace deals, but they were normalization deals. And what they really meant was, as Netanyahu put it in his speech at the UN in 2022, I win, you lose. The Netanyahu doctrine is I get everything I want. I get all the Sunni kings to come to me and nobody's coming for you. No citizenship, no independence. You'll just have to live in your open air concentration camps and learn to like it or not. And then it was 3 weeks later that Hamas broke out of their pen and kicked off the latest round of violence with the October 7th attack there. So that was Netanyahu's policy before, and that's why it was Trump and Kushner's policy before. And now, so the second question was, and what about, do I expect for there to be American troops in Gaza? So here's my good news for you. I think that when whoever it was convinced Trump to announce that America's taking possession of the Gaza Strip, I think that the silver lining here is that he doesn't know what he's talking about. And when somebody explains to him the facts, or has already explained to him the facts, he's already willing to back down on this. And so the facts are the Palestinians aren't giving up. So what are you going to do with them? And Trump had talked like, well, I'm going to make a magic wish and they're going to vanish like on Bewitched, or I'm going to get a giant broom and I'm just going to shoo them out of there. But what happened was the Israelis just slaughtered them by the high tens of thousands for the last year and a quarter and year and 3 months there. And they didn't leave. And they don't have anywhere to go anyway. And even if some of the refugees had been allowed to flee into Egypt, the fighting age males are still going to stay and fight and hold on to that territory. And so for Trump to take that territory would mean war. It would mean sending in, again, like we're talking about with Ukraine, sending in the 82nd Airborne, the 3rd Infantry Division, the U.S. Marines to go through and fight in an urban combat disaster type scenario, just like at Samara 06 or Baghdad 07. And where our guys are getting shot and killed constantly and blown up to death constantly. And I know he doesn't want that. And he said, well, no, we're not going to put troops on the ground there. Yeah, well, then you're not going to get it because there ain't no such thing as magic. And so you're stuck with a situation where, just like the Israelis are stuck with the Palestinians, and who are the people of the Gaza Strip anyway? They are the refugees from what we now call Israel, which is the land that the European Jews came and stole from them. And these are the refugees, like 80-something% of the population of Gaza are the people and the sons and daughters and grandsons and granddaughters of the people who were ethnically cleansed off of their land in 1948. But they won't just give up and lay down and die. And the Israelis have already proven that they can't get rid of them. They lost, officially at least 400 guys trying to get rid of them this time, and they had to back out.
Scott,
and they had to back down, and now the Palestinians are back in the north, and they're essentially would have to start the war all over again. So,
Scott, I want to. I know you got a hard stop here at 45 after,
yeah.
so I want to.
No. Is it 45? Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't know I had to go that early.
Yeah.
What's the next one? Hang on. No. I still have a few minutes.
Oh, I'll take it. I was trying to be respectful of what Connor said. So yes, go ahead.
No, that's
Continue
great.
on.
So yeah, on that thought, so now, okay, I had originally thought that my initial impression was just, oh, I get what he's doing, right? Is he's trying to play hardball and get the Egyptians and the Saudis and the Qataris to take responsibility for it. And he's just saying, oh, well, I'm going to take it over, so that they would say, no, you don't have to do that, so that he could say, well, then you do it then. But then I've seen him give a couple statements, including his interview with Bret Baier, where like, no, I don't think that this is some even two-dimensional plain old chess game. I think he really meant what he said about taking it over. But then it played out like that anyway. And they held this conference I think it was in Cairo, where the Saudis and the Qataris and the Egyptians all said, well, no, here's what we'll do. The Egyptians will take back over the Strip, and the Qataris and the Saudis will finance its rebuilding. They said that they would create a new civil administration that would be independent from Fatah and from Hamas. But they said that they would not require Hamas to disarm, although I guess they would ask them politely to stay the hell out of the way. And so that, to me, that's like the best case scenario, quite honestly, of what could happen there for the short term, for the people there to have something to eat and a safe place to live.
If I could finish on Ukraine here.
Yeah.
So just going back to that, thanks, Gunnar, for bringing us over to Israel, as if we could do that justice in 5 minutes.
Antiwar.com every morning, everybody.
Exactly, antiwar.com. Do you think Trump is being genuine, though, in his statements about he wants to see people stop dying? Because it seems to me, even if it was economic reasons, that would still be much better of a course than the current course that we're on. But do you think he's being genuine when he says that he wants to see an end to the bloodshed?
I'm not exactly sure what Donald Trump is ever really genuine about. He clearly has decided that that's his best argument against the war, is that it's just a bunch of people getting killed essentially for nothing, for what's already a lost cause. And it's funny because maybe it's just that we never hear anyone in Washington talk that way.
Right.
None of them are at all.
I know
so
he's not in. This is a deviation from all his predecessors, right?
But he did say the same thing about the other wars too, and this is something that even going back to his debates with Jeb Bush, he goes, "Listen, this guy's brother ruined everything, and we have to hold that against him. There has to be accountability for that." And he talked about how they completely destroyed Iraq. They helped create the basis for the rise of the Islamic State Caliphate in eastern Syria and western Iraq, and all of this stuff. And he said, and all of the civilians, all of our soldiers, but also all the civilians over there who've been killed, and for nothing. And like, quite honestly, I think it's a very normal sentiment for any regular human to have if they're not a government employee. And at that time, he was not, right? He's a lifelong business guy and show business guy and other things. But I think, like, anybody could tell you that like, geez, imagine getting blown up to death, part of your body blown up, and the rest of you got to bleed out sitting there, like, all of us have seen enough movies. If we haven't seen anybody, I guess I've seen a couple car wrecks, man. If you've ever seen someone die violently in real life, and then also, on the question you mentioned earlier, blowback, meaning the consequences from American foreign policy. I mean, think about how devastated you are when somebody you love dies of natural causes in their old age, how much that hurts. Now imagine someone you love dying way before their time because they got exploded to death by some politician from somewhere very far away. Like, that's the kind of vengeance that might not sleep. Like, this is the kind of problem that America, this is what Ron Paul said in 2008 in the big Giuliani moment. He says, using the government royal we, since he was a congressman at the time, but obviously he's the one who knows better, says if we think that we can just go around bombing people and intervening around the world like this and not cause resentment and consequences, then we do that at our own peril and the peril of our people that we're sworn to protect here. We're putting the American people in danger, creating enemies for them with all of this intervention. And so, he's probably the only other guy who really talked like that think about the poor civilians on the other side.
Right.
So,
and that's all I want is I want peace for my children, my grandchildren. And I think most Americans do. I want to plug 2 books. You mentioned David Stockman's Great Deformation, which actually is on my bookshelf. Great book. Also, your new book, Provoked. I'd highly recommend it. I think I probably bought it on Amazon, or people can go to antiwar.com, I'm assuming. Where else would they find your book?
Sure, yeah, scotthorton.org, and you can sign up for my podcast. I got 6,000 interviews and change going back to 2003 for you there as well.
Well, I'm humbled that you joined us. We come from some similar backgrounds in the Ron Paul community. And actually, MAGA Jesse, despite being a big Trump guy, also is very libertarian-minded, too. It's 5D chess all the time, right? I love it. Thank you, Scott, so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Take care. All right. Well, that's just, God, I'll tell you what. I wanted to do this show today on Ukraine, mostly because I couldn't get that Friday press conference out of my head. And then, I had some conversations with people, and I feel like maybe they're not as studied on Ukraine, or maybe they just buy in too much to the talking points in the mainstream media. Yes, Dawson, I see you shaking your head, but you're on the other side of politics. I'm saying people maybe in the center, or even maybe on our side, whatever that means. So I was like, man, we gotta do a show on this because it's so damn important. But also, Minnesota politics really sucks right now. I'm just gonna say, okay, so let's get into this. Our thoughts on Minnesota legislature. This is brought to you by Warren Wessel of Keller Williams Realty. If you're looking to buy a home or sell a home, give my good friend Warren a call at 612-419-7453. This legislative session, which started in, the first week of January, was the most interesting legislative session I have ever seen in my whole life. And we did so many shows on it, and I was like, there were times where I was so excited to get to headquarters to start talking about it. Just to recap, you got a Senate that you end up a tie because a senator dies, and then you got another one that's on trial, or was going to be on trial for first-degree felony burglary, which has now been delayed until after the legislative session. Then the Minnesota House, which was a tie from Election Day, ends up being a majority for the Republicans. Plus, you got a seat, Brad Tabke's seat, where he won by 14 votes. However, 21 ballots were thrown in the trash. I mean, you couldn't make it more interesting a month ago. And I was like, wow, we got so much material. And then the Republicans caved. And what was that, 3 weeks ago-ish? They caved. And they gave the Democrats pretty much everything. I guess all they got was the gavel. Lisa Demuth is the Speaker of the House, so we should be all excited about the fact she's got a gavel. And they can't pass any bills. Right. Yesterday, on the House floor, they had HF 12, a common sense bill. It says boys can't participate in girls' sports in Minnesota, right? They couldn't even pass that bill. Not a single Democrat voted for it. Republicans are unified. The final vote 67-66, and you would say, boy, that bill should have passed because they had a majority. But no, the Republicans put themselves in a box and said they can't pass bills unless there's 68 votes, which I don't even know where they get that from, because we found legislation that's in law right now that passed on a 67 vote margin. Or sorry, not margin, with 67 votes. Right.
They could argue, of course, it wouldn't, something wouldn't pass if it was a 67-67 vote. But in the situation where we're in, where there is an empty seat, 67-66 should mean that it passes. But of course, the Republicans have caved, and they caved at the most recent legislative session. If we want to pull up the B1, Dawson, we can check out this article here on actionforliberty.com, because the rhinos killed the Never Again bill on the House floor, and they pushed a fake, weak version instead, which was authored by Kristen Robbins. So patriots across Minnesota have joined Action for Liberty in our fight to fight for our signature piece of legislation, the Never Again bill, which is HF 26, which prevents Walz or any future governor from unilaterally shutting down our state with bogus emergency powers. While conservatives were clamoring for change on tyrannical COVID policies from the Republican-controlled state house, rhinos dropped the ball, killed the Never Again bill, and pursued a weak bill that actually increases the amount of time that a governor can unilaterally abuse emergency powers. Rhino Kristen Robbins proposed the fake Never Again bill, which was HF 21, which, as introduced, increased the emergency power declarations from 5 days to 14 days, did nothing to stop mask or vaccine mandates, and a governor could simply declare a new emergency after the first one ended, meaning these are never going to end. During the the floor session that took place, several amendments were proposed that improved the bill. the first of which came from Robbins herself to block the governor from declaring another preceding emergency on the same topic, which highlighted the massive flaw from her initially proposed language. She clearly felt the pressure from grassroots conservatives who called her out for her weak legislation. This amendment passed along party lines, 67 to 66. We got the amendment below, so also easy to point out that the Republicans seem to believe that it only takes 67 votes to add an amendment, but not to pass legislation. That tells you how weak these people are. Another amendment that was brought forward by Representative Pam Oldendorf added the opening language of the Never Again bill, which protects the rights of citizens, to this legislation. This amendment attempted to codify our personal liberties that come from God and nature, not government. This improvement did not solve the other issues of the bill, but it was a positive addition, which that is also linked and shown below. As seen above, this amendment was positive. However, Oldendorf attempted to hijack the Never Again bill by claiming the weak Rhino version created by Robbins was, quote, the Never Again bill moving forward, end quote. This falsehood was swatted down actually even by Democrats who saw the truth as beneficial for once. Oldendorf has no right to steal the work of grassroots patriots and attribute it to Robbins' bill that actually gives Walz more power in certain regards. That aside, the amendment was ultimately passed after being divided. The final amendment proposes what's known as a delete all amendment, which would strike the language of the entire bill and replace it with the language that is in the amendment. Democrat Minority Leader Jamie Long proposed a delete all amendment that replaced Robbins' legislation with the Never Again bill. Conservative legislators should have themselves introduced an amendment to replace Robbins' weak bill with the Never Again bill in its entirety, rather than allowing Democrats to do it in bad faith. This was certainly an attempt by Democrats to divide Republicans on a known hot-button issue. However, that did not make this amendment a bad thing to vote for. After Long introduced the amendment, Jim Nash moved to kill the Never Again bill by claiming it is not germane.
Alleged author, an author on the bill,
Yes.
Never Again bill,
Right.
tried to kill it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. He's an author on the bill, but he isn't a supporter for some reason. So even though he says it's not germane, even though it addresses the same exact subject matter, just like Nash has been doing in committee, he wants to stall the Never Again bill and prevent the GOP from being put on record. Harry Niska also spoke in favor of killing the bill, despite stealing language and talking points about our bill during his speech. Empty Suit Speaker Lisa Kamala Demuth initially said that she found Nash's point of order not well taken, but then immediately flipped and said it was well taken, which means to block a vote on this bill. That's what she was doing. This parliamentary trickery led to a vote on whether or not the body should uphold Demuth's decision, where every single Republican caved and refused to allow the Never Again bill replace the fake version and allow a vote on the floor. So we put that vote below. Even Never Again bill co-authors and so-called liberty legislators who were endorsed and elected off the backs of hard work of grassroots A4L supporters went along with the Rhino plan and killed the Never Again bill. Politicians are almost always self-interested. They would rather have friendly relationships with party leadership than fight for our liberties.
That's the truth.
This would surprise Action for Liberty if we actually held high regards for the crooked politicians in the first place. But we know who these people are, so it doesn't surprise us. And of course, Democrats fear-mongered about the nonsense during the debate, and Republicans threw out red meat talking points. But at the end of the day, the fake Never Again bill failed after receiving a vote of 66 to 67, where actually Harry Niska flipped and voted with the Democrats, but that was a strategic move to allow it to be brought up again. But since the GOP has caved on the false notion that 68 votes are needed to pass legislation, they may have already shot themselves in the foot indefinitely. While this news is largely bad, it is not too late for the Never Again bill to be passed on the legislature floor. Rhinos think that they can trick patriots with garbage, but we have become too savvy to become fooled. Republicans were sure to join Democrats during that day of session for a woke resolution honoring Black History Month, but they couldn't be bothered to fight for legislation that patriots have been demanding for years. Action for Liberty will continue to provide patriots with hard-hitting, truth-exposing Minnesota reporting that cannot be found anywhere else. So just so it is perfectly clear what took place on this House floor session, the Republicans caved. They would not allow the true Never Again bill to be debated on the floor. They did not want to allow conservatives, or I should say Republicans, to be put in a tough vote because they would actually be forced to end the emergency powers once and for all. according to Kristen Robbins, Tim Walz should be able to lock you down for 2 weeks. Our position is that Tim Walz shouldn't be able to lock you down for a single minute. So it's extremely clear that our position was much more conservative, and the Rhinos do not want to be put on record with that. And it's sad to see that the Republicans are even playing the same parliamentary games that we saw Melissa Horton pulling on them all the time. So the Republicans are no better in certain cases because they're willing to pull the exact same tactics, and they do not want true liberty legislation to receive floor votes.
Cindy Lou says, "Where's our video, Jake? Explain the fake Never Again bill." That's kind of an insider thing because at Thursday night I explained this to a group of our big supporters at our super secret monthly event. Well, pull up that article again. It just happens to be embedded right there. Dawson and I spent all Friday putting this together. Edited was just under 13 minutes. So if you would like to see a video explanation of what Jesse just went through, right there for you, Cindy. I was thinking about you. I think it actually went out this weekend. It's Saturday, right? Saturday. So there you go. This breaks it down. Dawson put together the graphics kind of showing how this all works, and then I actually interlace it with clips from the House floor. There you go. And we actually break down what the legislators say on the House floor. Okay, so very good job, Jesse, by the way, on I think a complex issue on how to explain this to people. Because, this show is not like Republicans good, Democrats bad. Well, actually, the second part is true. The Democrats bad, but it's not like all Republicans are good. Now, there's hope, at least in the Republican Party. As I was talking to Scott Horton, Trump is drastically different than the previous presidents in the sense that at least he's talking about people not dying anymore. It seems to be lost in most previous presidents. So there is hope in the Republican Party. Trump actually gives you a lot of hope in the sense that, he shows that somebody that's against the grain, against the establishment, a disruptor, if you will, in politics, can be successful and do stuff, right? Which is what I'm hoping. That's what I'm praying for. He continues doing that kind of stuff. How about that Epstein list next time? How about that one? All right. So with that being said, someone who is standing up for the status quo against the disruptors is your buddy Walter Hudson. You said you wanted to break down a video. I haven't watched this video yet, but this came out over the weekend. He's on Twitter. You said he mentions me by name on this thing, and he goes on a diatribe basically complaining about Action for Liberty. So this is the first time I've ever seen it. Jesse, I'll let you guide it, and I'll give you my thoughts on it because Walter Hudson certainly seems to be an enemy to the liberty movement these days, even though he kind of grew up in that movement. So, but, this isn't the first time a person gets elected, goes to the Capitol, and then turns to the dark side. In fact, that's so common. It's almost like there's a movie that came out in the 70s about going to the dark side. What was that movie? Oh yeah, that definitely exists. In fact, that franchise has gone on for 9 episodes now. Great. I love Star Wars. I don't know. Are you a Star Wars guy? Or are you?
I haven't seen a single Star Wars
movie.
Oh
my God, we do need to have a Friday movie day here. We'll start with episode. We'll do it right. We'll start with episode 4. All right, let's go ahead. Let's break this down.
Yeah, so Dawson, let's go ahead and pull up the post by Walter on Twitter. And, people will notice on here that this is his pinned post. This is the number one priority of Walter Hudson right now is to fight Action for Liberty. It's funny. He has no issue with the rhinos in power. His only issues are with the grassroots liberty conservatives. He needs to remember that he works for we the people, not the other way around. So let's go ahead and start, with that first timestamp at 2:40 where he is discussing Action for Liberty and the fact that we had the audacity to demand things out of Lisa Demuth as speaker. So let's go ahead and play that there.
Legislative session. Leading up to the January 14th start date, A4L encouraged our members to withhold votes for Speaker Lisa Demuth in order to demand specific policy commitments that she was in no position to promise. The speaker is powerful, to be sure, but she only has one vote. She can't compel other members to vote for a particular policy. So the idea that you could secure ultra-conservative outcomes like pre-COVID spending levels or any other specific changes to policy by holding the vote for speaker hostage is categorically absurd.
No,
if you were to pull aside
stop right there.
Democrat,
That's a He goes on to say, all
Well,
you
hold
have
on,
to
it
do is
just
ask
takes one-
Melissa Hortman. He says Melissa Hortman knows better than anybody. It's like riding a bull. You have to work with people. You have to discuss things with people to earn their votes. It's like, what a joke.
I wish that's the way that things worked up at the Capitol. If that's the way things worked up at the Capitol and we had rational people, then boy, it'd be worth going up to the Capitol and talking to these
right,
bozos.
yeah, as if we've never seen Democrats force their members to vote for a specific issue. What a joke.
Yeah, what do you think? Geez, Walter, why do you think 6 con artist Democrats reneged on their vote against Walz's emergency powers and started supporting it? What do you think that was? This doesn't happen? Like,
just from convincing, just from
statement.
Conversation, what a joke. So let's go ahead and move forward to the 344. So go
By the way, you know, it's not even Lisa Damuth. It's the idea is one person not voting for Lisa Damuth would not make her speaker. So if she would have stood on those policies, isn't that what Action for Liberty was asking for anyhow?
Right.
Was
That
don't
and
vote
also
for
do
her.
not seat Brad Tabke, which the rhinos all caved on. You know, including Walter. So which actually we'll be discussing that in a little bit.
But that was Tuesday. Walter was on board with this stuff.
Yeah,
remember?
right.
Tuesday,
Wednesday Walter.
Wednesday
forgets,
Walter's not.
yeah. All right. So go ahead and play that.
By the way, for the people that don't know, he's actually a state representative. He's in his second term.
Yeah.
If you were to not force.
Weird.
But unserious expectations are the bread and butter of a group like Action for Liberty. It's their stock and trade. And that's not by accident. As an activist, prior to being elected as a state representative, I personally attended Action for Liberty trainings on 3 occasions over the course of 15 years. Those trainings were based on materials provided by a national organization called the Foundation for Applied Conservative Leadership, or FACL. FACL trainings are attractive to disgruntled conservative activists because, like any cult, they present a sense of esoteric knowledge into the way things really work. They offer a secret path to power for people who feel powerless.
Okay, go ahead and pause
Oh,
there.
God.
So obviously,
he's even worse than I thought these
right,
days.
he's unbelievable. To try to say that faculty trainings are that way, and you know, he's saying it's a cult. And what's interesting is, you know, people may not know this about Walter, but he comes from a cult in his own words. He says he was a Jehovah's Witness growing up, which he describes as a cult. You know, he obviously still has that cult mentality, except where does his loyalty lie? It's to the Team Red Kool-Aid. It's to the establishment. It's to the Rhino leadership. So the fact that he wants to call it a cult.
But hold on one second. I think the bigger thing here is the fact that he undermines the frustration that conservative activists like you have and want to learn a way with the limited time and money you have to do something that actually will be successful in politics, right? This is why Trump is giving so many people hope, is because they're like, well, I voted for Trump, and now I feel like that vote for Trump is actually literally going against the status quo. He's undermining people that have that viewpoint. And by the way, why do you think Action for Liberty exists, and why does Action for Liberty do well? Because there's a lot of people that feel that way. That's the reason. Like, it's not like they're just turning new people into, well, I guess I would say that there's new people that are learning the problems with the Republican establishment. But there was enough people that existed prior to Action for Liberty even existing that already knew how bad the Republican establishment was, and that they weren't getting any bang for their buck with the time and money that they gave. We got a rumble rant.
Well, and also he's being a massive hypocrite by saying that, you know, it's a cult to be able to do that, but then what he's describing is not a cult at all. But
he's doing God's work up there.
Exactly. But we got $5 Rumble Ram from O'Bannon says, Wednesday Walter allegedly got doxxed by a tranny, and that asshat uses it as an opportunity to take a jab at Mort. What a piece of shit. And I know what you're talking about. It's somehow Action for Liberty's fault that a leftist went nuts on him. I'm not sure. Apparently we're the problem for everything that goes on.
I didn't know that we knew who had doxed him.
He puts it out there. He says who it was. Yeah. So, but let's go ahead and keep moving forward.
By the way,
he
hold on one second, because I did see that post, and I foolishly responded to, like, literally, Walter lives on Twitter. Like, that's his whole thing. You know, I wouldn't honestly be shocked if he gets paid to go against Action for Liberty. I have no idea, but the level of energy he puts into going after Action for Liberty these days is really bizarre to me. But you know, who is he to talk about this stuff? Because he said, like, families are off limits. He literally made up a story or promoted a story on Twitter that was, like, slanderous towards people that I know and ended up retracting it when he found out it was false. Like, literally, what do you think that was doing to families that would have witnessed that tweet? I don't want to speak of it, but I mean, that's who Walter is. And that's where I kind of learned, like, holy shit, this guy's unhinged these days.
Right. And obviously, yeah, as if we're responsible for other people's actions that have nothing to do with us and don't even agree with us on anything. So,
Right.
but, he goes on to kind of misrepresent faculty training further. We don't need to watch every second of it, but he's apparently getting mad at people for learning the fact that you want to target specific voters instead of targeting voters that are already on your side or targeting voters who are already on the Democrat side. So apparently he's against conservatives learning basic political strategy. And then he also goes on to say that the tactics in FACL are what the Democrats do, because the Democrats will try to force exactly what they want, including trannies in school sports. Well, exactly. That's kind of our point, that the Democrats force exactly what they want through, and they get their legislators to do it, while the Republicans cave, and they refuse to do what their base is asking them to do.
Another tactic I've seen the Democrats do on many occasions is make a point of order that a bill is not germane.
Yeah,
So,
right.
I've seen that tactic. I guess you guys are using the same tactics as the Democrats. I've also seen the tactic of the Democrats passing unconstitutional omnibus bills that you have just an hour to read. Oh, yeah, you guys use that tactic too. What do you got, Dustin?
So I just have a question about that whole bill thing that was going on. Is the reason that the Republicans wouldn't vote for the real Never Again bill just because they don't want A4L to have like a win under their belt?
Oh, I'm sure that weighs into it. Guys like Walter, who was literally the author of the Never Again bill the last 2 years,
Right.
who also voted against public transparency. This is what I think that's the bigger one, really, is that they don't want the weak members having to take a vote on something that they don't really agree with. Because this is a sad
Right,
thing.
they want to protect the
once again,
rhinos.
this show's called The Truth Hurts. We're going to tell you the truth, even if it's hurtful. It's not that all Democrats are the enemy of the Never Again bill and stopping endless emergency powers. Republicans are as well. Like, there are people on the Republican side that think that COVID was handled correctly by guys like Governor Walz. Now, those people who exist in the legislature are very quiet these days, but they still are out there. You could find these people at the BPOU. They think the Never Again bill is too extreme because a governor really needs emergency powers because, you need to save us from ourselves. It's like, no, we have a constitution. The governor can't just declare himself king. So not every Republican's against it, but we'll never know if we can't get a test vote, and that's their game here. Is they want to stop that from even happening.
My other question that pops up in my head is, what kind of leverage does the Rhino faction of the Republican Party
They have much more control than the Liberty faction, that's for sure. The Rhinos are pulling the strings of the State House caucus. I mean, Danny Nadeau has way more power than Drew Roach.
Well, so
that's a fact.
Well, so that's why I'm curious, because if Drew Roach, if any one Republican had gone and voted the other way, then that would be that win for the
Correct.
real Never Again bill. So that's like insane leverage that the Republican Party has to have against these grassroots guys. What would it be?
Yep, you are right. And as George Carlin said, it's one big party and you aren't in it, right? Or it's one big club and you're not in it. Because don't ever underestimate the gravitational pull of being in the club. All right. So that is something that we have to contend with. Now we come from the position of being right, from the position of truth, from the position of conservative values. So we have more people on our side. The problem is they're the ones in charge of the institution. They're the ones that, literally this is what they do on the Democrat side. I bet you it happens on the Republican side. They're the ones that say, you won't get your next campaign funded. We'll find a primary challenger for you. Mm-hmm. The Liberty Movement has got such an uphill battle. I always explain it this way. It's hard enough to find a good candidate, then it's hard enough to get them endorsed, then it's hard enough to win a primary, then it's hard enough to win a general election in some cases. And after all that's said and done, the establishment can still spoil them once they're in there because the gravitational pull of the caucus and being part of the club. It takes very few people that are willing to go against the grain. Eric Mortensen went against the grain. Donald Trump is going against the grain of the Washington establishment. Nice thing about Trump is, no one really denies that he, had a mandate from the people. If Trump only won one battle state, it would have been a different calculus right now in politics. but because he won 7 battleground states, it's like no one can deny on the Republican side that there was a mandate for Donald Trump's policies. And so they got to shut up and work behind the scenes against him, which they are clearly doing. All right, continue on.
Yep. And so I guess we will go ahead and move on to 825 in the video there, Dawson, because he goes on to say here that Action for Liberty doesn't actually care about passing conservative policies. So it's just a ridiculous lie. Let's go ahead and pull that back up. Yeah, go ahead and let's play there.
Elections. They don't care about passing conservative policies. They care about wielding power through division and chaos for its own
That
sake.
doesn't even make sense.
Here in Minnesota, we've seen this playbook firsthand. Action for Liberty, as one of the most vocal adherents to this facile doctrine, spends more time attacking Republicans than fighting Democrats. This past week, that came into crystal clear focus when the interests of A4L aligned with the actions of Minnesota House Democrat floor leader.
All right, stop real quick, because that's, oh my God.
It's
what a stupid thing to say. First of all, last I checked, and by the way, he knows this because he came up to our State Fair booth. We ran the Never Walls booth
for at least the last 2
Tens
years.
Of thousands of these fans given out to State Fair goers, got millions of impressions nationwide.
And anybody that reads our reporting, anybody that reads the news that we put out there, it's extremely clear where Action for Liberty is coming from. It's extremely clear that we see Democrats as the bigger enemy. But, you know, obviously Walter just wants to manipulate it. And it's funny that he says that Action for Liberty is the one that doesn't want to pass conservative policies. Really? Because I seem to think that it's the State House Republicans who don't want to pass conservative policies. Wasn't it the State House Republicans that caved to allow it to say that you need 68 votes to pass legislation? How are you going to be able to pass legislation if the Republicans don't even have the votes? We were the ones, Action for Liberty was the one that was telling people, no, it's actually 67. We were giving the Republicans a chance to be able to implement legislation. Walter and the Rhinos have prevented that from taking place.
You know, yeah, it's so, he's like, this hypothetical, we don't want to pass conservative legislation, which I think most people just say is absurd.
Right.
And you guys literally aren't passing conservative
That's
legislation.
That's why we're pushing
like,
ultra-conservative legislation that he even describes as ultra-conservative. So let's go ahead and talk about some ultra-conservative legislation. Go ahead and go
hold on, because I want to also talk about, because I saw where he's going with this one, which is a ridiculous claim. Here's the other thing: is this guy's lying through his teeth. He's been to our training. He even alludes to he's been to our training 3 times. He knows the FACL model. Why do we go after Republicans? He knows this. He's literally received this training. When you're trying to move forward conservative policy, you do something called a 5-column analysis. And the people that are on side with you are double pluses, and the people that are never going to come your way is the double minuses. Then you have a +1, a fence sitter 0, and a -1. The first people you go after to move forward on policy is the +1s, and that's generally Republicans. So this is the con that he's basically wanting everyone to fall prey to, is that the Democrats are the real enemy, so you should go attack the Democrats. And guess what that does? That helps them because it takes the pressure off of them and also helps them in election time. Where we go, hey, before we go attack the Democrats and spend money and resources where it's much harder to pull them this way,
who support trannies and girls sports, right?
Yeah, get the people that should be on board over here first from a practical standpoint before we start spending time and resources. If you want a great case in point, the first time we got a vote to end walls and emergency powers in 2020, this is April 14, 2020, a month after Governor Walz locked down the state of Minnesota. We had the first bill or first resolution to end walls and emergency powers. Maybe Walter knows this. He's once again, he's lying. Only 15 Republicans supported that. Only 15. 14 abstained, and the rest were all against ending walls and emergency powers. So using Walter's idea, strategy, we should just start attacking the Democrats right away. It's like, no, we still got to get all those other Republicans on board before I start wasting money on I shouldn't say wasting money, because essentially it's going to take money and resources to bring those Democrats over. And that's how we ended up on the Iron Range going against those con artists, which, by the way, at this point, Walter, none of them are still in the legislature. Gee, I wonder why that is. 3 of them, I think, just retired right off the bat. It's Mike Sundin and Paul Marquardt and, I guess Eklund literally lost, I believe. Yeah, Eklund literally lost the next election, and so did Sandsteed, or was that 2 elections? Well, I'm already forgetting.
Yeah,
all 6 of them are no longer there, and actually 7 if you include the fact that Carla Begum in the Senate didn't run again. So that's how the model works. You know that. You went through the training. You admitted you went through the training, and you're just being a liar right now. Now continue this video because this is really precious what he's going to talk about here.
Now, ever since the pandemic, Minnesota conservatives have justly hungered for action to rein in the emergency powers of Governor Tim Walz. Seizing on that hunger, Action for Liberty, working with then Representative Eric Mortensen, who, since losing his seat to Democrat Brad Tapke, now serves as the president of Action for Liberty, authored what they call the Never Again Bill. Now, the spirit of the Never Again Bill is 100% dead on. The idea
it's 100%
is to prevent
dead on.
any future governor from doing what Walz did, from declaring a peacetime emergency and unilaterally declaring that we can't live our lives, that our kids can't go to school, that we can't operate our businesses, that we can't visit our dying loved ones, that we can't attend church. All while the liquor stores and big box stores and the governor's personal friends remain open for business.
Much better than Robbins.
The problem with the bill is in the particulars of its solution. It's too broad. It may, in fact, be unconstitutional.
Wait a second. Hold on. He literally authored that bill last year.
He talks about that too. He's just about to say some of that too. That I authored the bill knowing that we were going to have to go through this whole process and amend it and this and that and this and that, but I never got the opportunity because it was a Democrat-controlled legislature.
God.
So he's got all these excuses, and it's one of those things that this legislation has worked through many different minds, and it's gotten to a point where we're not concerned about the constitutionality of it. We're what's actually unconstitutional is what Walz did. Walz is the one who was abusing his power and taking away our freedom. We are the ones who are trying to prevent unconstitutional actions from ever taking place again. And the only way that you can prevent unconstitutional actions from ever taking place again is to make sure that the governor has zero ability to be able to shut our state down. Not 14 days, 0 days.
Yeah, you can't just suspend our Constitution, which is what Governor Walz essentially did. But yeah, let's talk about constitutionality. Jeez.
Right.
Oh my God, he is getting worse. All right, what's the next one?
Yeah, and so let's go ahead and go to 1110, where he is discussing a little bit of the fake version of Robbins' bill, and he is also discussing that Action for Liberty only wants pain for pain's sake.
Okay, that makes sense.
During his single term in the legislature. And since the standard of his organization, Action for Liberty, is not victory, but inflicting pain on Republicans for pain's sake.
We don't want victories.
Robbins' bill isn't good enough.
Yeah, it's not.
See, the game that Action for Liberty is playing here is that they want to move the goalpost 10 yards out of bounds and then claim anyone who doesn't go along with that isn't a real conservative.
Okay, go ahead and pause it there. So it's unbelievable.
Never Again bill's out of bounds.
Right, we are pushing.
You authored the Never Again bill.
Right.
So you were out of bounds. Like, what is he even saying here?
Exactly.
What a moron.
Move the goalposts. Really, because the Republicans were the ones that moved the goalposts on Tapke to where they were saying at first they weren't going to seat him. Then they decided, let's move the goalposts and we're going to seat him. And, our philosophy and political strategy has never changed. We're not the ones moving anything. All we're doing is pushing the GOP to the right. We're pushing them to be more conservative. And exactly. Of course, as described in the article, Robbins' bill is not good enough. It increases governor power in certain regards, and like I said, it still allows us to be shut down and locked down for our state for 2 weeks. We don't believe that you should be locked down at all, and so that's why Action for Liberty was saying that the Robbins' bill was not good enough. And to say that we just want pain for pain's sake, I mean, how ridiculous. Who wants that? Doesn't make any sense. What we want to do is push these legislators to be more conservative, and he knows that.
Yeah, there's this old accusation against Action for Liberty. They're just Democrat funded. It's interesting. The organization has been accused of being Koch funded, which we're not, and funded by the left or the Democrats, which we're not. It's like the most ridiculous thing. This isn't crazy. I think who was it? It's been accused of. I think Shapiro's been accused of being a Israeli sympathizer and a Nazi at the same time, right? So there's this craziness that goes on in the parlance of American politics. But Walter falls trap on that. Honest to God, isn't it clear that we're like conservatives? I think Walter got involved in politics for the first time in the Tea Party era, 2010. I think when I first met him, he was new to politics. I was actually running the college Republicans in George W. Bush's first term. Like, what are you talking about? I've probably been a Republican a lot longer than you. So, like, I don't even know what these guys are talking about. This is a ridiculous claim. All right, next.
Right, and
next
yeah, let's go ahead and keep playing because he goes on to say that Action for Liberty is just about money, and he'll talk about a legislative champion, what that really means. So let's go ahead and just keep playing from here, Dawson.
Of the manufactured outrage, regardless of legislative outcomes, and perpetuate their own existence as an organization and their own financial well-being as individuals. In order to do that, what they want and what the Foundation for Applied Conservative Leadership prescribes is what they call legislative champions.
Yeah.
An A4L legislative champion is someone who is willing to portray their caucus by using the parliamentary process to secure roll call votes.
That's accurate.
Which enable A4L to campaign against Republicans.
Yes, people that aren't on board moving forward legislation.
When Eric Mortensen, the current A4L chair or president, was a member of the legislature, he would attempt to bring amendments to bills on the House floor in order to get Republicans on the record voting against something A4L could then market against House Republicans.
By the way, stop real quick. And that the conservative base is on board with, right? Like that's what he's saying is, how dare conservatives actually know how legislators vote on the things they care about? Okay, so that's what he seems to be against here, but let him continue.
He wasn't actually trying to get something passed. He wasn't legislating.
Of course he was, if it could.
He was just abusing the legislative process to build his own personal brand and to help his friend, A4L founder Jake Duesenberg, make more money from duped conservative activists.
Okay, go ahead, pause right there.
So they're idiots. So, so the only thing is we're maybe we've done the duping. I don't know what he's alleging here, or they're just too stupid. And we just do this to personally personally benefit ourselves. It's a ridiculous claim,
right?
But because this is the other thing that Walter's a liar on. He knows me. Walter and I have known each other for over a decade. You know I believe this stuff. I used to be on your radio show all the time. Do you think I don't believe this stuff? Is that what you're saying? What a ridiculous claim.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. You know, what he's saying is Mortensen made amendments, rhinos refused to vote for it, and then A4L informed the grassroots. What a crime! Crime. What a crime. The fact that we keep people educated and that we tell them, hey, there's rhinos who don't want to vote for conservative bills. There's rhinos that won't vote for conservative amendments. You'd think that the conservative grassroots would want to know which ones are doing the right thing and which ones aren't. And also, it comes to no surprise that Walter's always talking about financial benefit. He's always talking about money. Walter has money on his mind ever since he lost his salary DEI position with the MNGOP. And if money was our top priority, I'll tell you, liberty conservative politics is the wrong avenue to go down. If you wanted to actually be, if this was all about money, we would side with the establishment. Right. There's way more money with the establishment. If we wanted to just make money, and had no principles, of course, we would be like Walter. We would join the establishment because there's more connections, more money, more everything on that side. So it's just interesting that he wants to try and claim that this is about money when really we stick our necks out on the line for this kind of stuff. We definitely make a lot of enemies within the political circles and with these powerful people, state legislators and whatnot. So to try to think that it's about money when it's anything but that, it's all about principle.
Well, it's so utterly ridiculous with Walter. And first of all, he's lying because he knows better than this stuff. Okay, so I just have to put that out there. But the idea that we don't really believe in this stuff, well, Walter, I wouldn't even accuse you of that. I just accuse you of being a sellout, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I do believe in your heart you believe in conservative things. You're just failing to do anything about it. You've probably sold out on the actual thing that's needed to accomplish those things long term. But the idea that you say, and I know you know better, but say we don't even believe in this stuff is so utterly ridiculous.
Right.
You've known me for 10 years. I used to go on your radio show. I have a show. We broadcast 2 days a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. That is a lot of me pulling off an acting job.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I guess he thinks I'm an Oscar-level actor, that I've literally been running this acting job to this degree where people literally think I'm conservative. Maybe, just maybe, I actually am very conservative and think this way. And by the way, probably have thought this way much longer than you, Walter. Right. I'm pretty sure he got into politics only a decade ago. I go way further back than that.
And, he says that forcing votes are abuse of the legislative process. It's so unbelievable. So apparently, if you step out of line with the corrupt establishment party bosses, you're abusing the process. Really, we would say that you are fighting the process and you're allowing for the voices of citizens to be truly represented rather than just going along with what the party bosses tell you to do and tell you to think and tell you to vote. He also goes on to basically say that Eric Mortensen lost disgracefully to Brad Tabke, which is interesting because who is responsible for Brad Tabke being in the legislature this cycle? Oh, yeah, that's right. Walter Hudson, the Republicans, because Walter was voting with the Democrats to allow Brad Tabke to be seated. Walter and all the other rhinos, except for Drew Roach and Tom DePel, voted to make sure that Brad Tabke would be seated. So, for him to try to say that it's Mortensen's fault that Brad Tabke is in there is quite ironic. And also, I think Walter knows better than to say that anyway, because let's just be honest with what the situation was with Eric Mortensen. The HRCC and the Republican Party was refusing to help him, so that he had no assistance from the Republicans. The Republicans were telling all of the people during the primary, do not vote for Eric Mortensen. They were supporting Booz and Bob Lunan instead, so they were dividing the Republican base in Shakopee from instead of consolidating and supporting their incumbent representative, Eric Mortensen. And then also, it completely leaves out the fact that, it's true that Eric Mortensen was more conservative than his area. And so because of that, he maybe lost some moderate voters. When you're in a swing district and you stick your neck out there and you fight like a conservative, you're going to lose some supporters. That's just bound to happen. Because we can't expect that every single person in Minnesota is going to be a liberty warrior that wants to see that happen. So he maybe lost some voters, but
I don't believe...
if you were in a red district, of course that wouldn't be any issue. But the fact that he was able to do that in a swing district, you're lucky that Republican was able to win that in the first place. And thank God it was one who was fighting for liberty, that was doing something.
And Walter comes from a strong red district. But, But that's even... I don't even know if I totally agree with what you just said. You have to understand that his district got redistricted. They lost 2 conservative precincts and got 2 Democrat
Yep, there's that too.
It's so the district got worse, but it is what it is. I mean, listen, there's no shame in running again and trying to run. I guess Walter's position is it's shameful, or what was the words he used? Shameful or whatever his words
I
was.
Don't know.
Disgraceful?
Yeah.
Like, so when you lose an election, it's disgraceful, I guess.
Yeah.
Hudson. Okay.
Right.
I'm sure you got a lot of buddies, Walter, that also lost elections. It's good that people try to run. So, God, what an asset. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know you've always done, I've thought it was funny, when you went after Walter, because I was like, I have no issue with Walter, He is completely changed in just the last 3 months. And best I can tell is he lost his fucking job with the party and he's butthurt. And so he's made it. I mean, it also does seem like there's some interest behind what he's doing. Like, why would you spend 20 minutes,
and making
if you don't even have a job?
His top priority. This is his
if you don't have a job,
why?
Why? Because it's not your job as a legislator. So why would this be your job to do a video 20 minutes? And clearly he was reading a script at the beginning.
Yeah.
On Action for Liberty.
He's
and by the
reading
way,
something.
Clearly, Action for Liberty is powerful. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing this all the time.
Right, exactly. He tries to juggle the two ideas that we're useless and that we can't get anything done, that we're ineffective. But at the same time, we seem to have all this power to be able to break the majority. So he obviously is. And, like you said, he's a changed person. This isn't who he always was. And he even talks about this.
Sad.
Let's go to 1330, where he admits that he chose to side with the establishment and that it was more convenient to be with them rather than being a fighter like we had thought he might be.
Becky Hack says maybe he is 1972-10. No, he's not Michael Broadcourt.
Yeah.
I know. Twitter's videos
the conclusion that their methodology only works to pad their pockets.
Oh, God.
It doesn't get bills passed. It doesn't deliver for Minnesotans. So this year, with a new crop of freshman House Republicans newly elected, A4L is looking for their new champion, someone who is willing to betray the rest of us in exchange for being lauded by an ineffective minority of activists for being the only real conservative.
Boy, he really spends a lot of time against an ineffective
org
org.
On that front. We certainly have ideological disagreements within the House Republican caucus. Any group of people does.
And why does the leftist
we have not had a single member who has been willing to sabotage our team to make themselves look better than the rest of us, which is exactly what A4L demands.
Yeah, stand up for their constituents.
In the absence of a Judas in the House Republican caucus.
Oh, Judas. Oh, my God. This
who
guy
has A4L turned to?
What?
You'll love this.
Hold on. No, stop real quick.
Their new...
Just stop. You're a Judas if you turn against the other 66 politicians
Against
in
the
the caucus.
rhinos.
That's what he's saying. Instead of standing up for your people. You know who the real Judas is? Is the person that cares more about the 66 other members of the caucus than your damn constituents who are demanding something. What a phony. All right.
Right.
Boy, I don't know if I've got temperament to finish this out.
Yeah, he basically just goes on to say Jamie Long is our legislative champion.
Is that what he says here? Go ahead, play it.
Legislative champion. Their new hero is House Democrat floor leader Jamie Long.
Okay, well, whatever.
I recognize the author of the amendment.
I don't even know what to say on that. That's the most ridiculous. What a
right,
freaking
as if
moron.
we requested it, and maybe I shouldn't say this, but here's the thing.
By the way, he's not a moron. He knows what he's saying. He's lying. He's lying to you on that one.
Right, of course. Nobody from Action for Liberty talked to the Democrats and asked them to make that motion. In fact,
did he say that in there?
Well, no, he doesn't say that, but that's what he's implying, that we're somehow working with the Democrats. I mean, give me a break. It's just a moment where the Democrats also saw the opportunity to divide, but that doesn't mean that the vote was wrong. So, yeah, it's ridiculous. But we can keep moving here. Let's go ahead and go to 16.
What else is there? I don't really care
there's just I know there's just a couple other things.
Like literally when you
so
say
it's on record, we gotta clarify a couple of these things.
But honestly, when you say something like that, it's like you're so utter.
He has no credibility.
You should have no credibility after. You think we care about Jamie Long? Like, you just watch our video, which I'm sure came out before your video. Like, literally, I say this is what the Democrats are doing here. They're not being serious.
Right. So let's go to 1620, Dawson.
Which video you're referring to came out before this one? Jake.
What's that?
He's saying the one that he made about how
the one we did on Friday.
Legislative one.
Well, I guess it came out Saturday morning.
This came out on the 28th, so a day before.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it matters, but
all right, yep, go ahead and play there.
Author of the Mortensen bill from the rest of us. Doing so would effectively break the House Republican majority. We're 67 members against 66 Democrats. So if Long can successfully drive one of us to fight against the rest, the Democrat trifecta will effectively be restored.
Okay, go ahead and pause it. It's the most ridiculous argument in the world. He's saying that if a Republican, if Drew, for example, would have voted to allow the amendment, it would break the GOP majority. I mean, tell me how that works. By pushing a conservative amendment, that somehow breaks the GOP majority, that somehow implements a Democratic trifecta, that somehow restores it. I mean, it's unbelievable. And, a point I was going to make, too, on the amendment that was proposed by Jamie Long, the fact that, of course, Action for Liberty didn't tell Jamie Long to introduce that. I requested that Republicans be the ones who introduced that amendment, along with several other ones. I won't say who I told that to, but it was someone within the House, and they completely dropped the ball. They did not insert a single amendment to try to improve the bill. So really, I was hoping that the Republicans could offer these things in good faith, but of course the Democrats took the advantage instead.
Jesse, technically, Pam Altendorf did amend the bill and added the Never Again's Bill of Rights into it. So it did make it better in that regard.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. No, and that's the thing. All three amendments were improvements. Even Robin's amendment was an improvement. So there is no dispute on that. So all three of those amendments that were intended on that bill improved the bill. And, so it's just ironic that, we're somehow both things, like I had said earlier, that we're ineffective, but also at the same time, we have the ability to break the GOP majority. So he's making no sense. Let's go and go to 18 minutes in. This is where Walter is saying that we need to cut the cancer out of the MNGOP, obviously talking about us. So let's go and play that.
Apart from the inside. If you want to see Minnesota flip red, if you want conservative policies enacted, then it's time to reject these destructive tactics. It's time to cut out the cancer of Action for Liberty from the Republican Party of Minnesota.
Okay, and go ahead and skip forward to 1830 because let's go ahead and
what does he say? This recent alignment? What is he saying there?
Jamie Long should be the death knell.
Yeah, it should be the end of us. Is basically what he says.
Be the death knell.
That's the dumbest.
It's so unbelievable.
Dumb. God, you're so dumb.
No self-respecting Republican.
But he's going to say how he was a supporter here.
I'm mad now. I'm very mad.
And I say this as someone who has been associated with them in the past.
That's right. Yeah, you turn.
Yeah, this isn't about judging activists for falling for what A4L has sold.
Oh, because they're too dumb, Walter.
I get it. It's attractive to think you have the inside track on the real nature of politics and can somehow coerce.
No, you lecture us on the real nature of politics. How are you passing legislation right now, huh? Come on, you tell us. Tell us exactly how much of a champion you are. And by the way, how many elections have you guys won recently, right? Seems to me you've lost 3 or 4 elections in a row. You failed to win the Minnesota House. Tell us, lecture us more on your great strategy, Walter.
Right.
Jeez.
It's ridiculous. And, a point I want to make is that, let's imagine a scenario where a Democrat representative opposed the child mutilation bill. Would Walter Hudson praise them as a hero, or would he say they betrayed their caucus? Of course, he would praise them as a hero for doing the right thing. So why can't Republicans do the same exact thing by, not drinking the red Kool-Aid and choosing to vote the right way and do the right thing by going against their party, by going against their caucus? Shouldn't Republicans be afforded the same opportunity to do the right thing as Democrat legislators should be? And, it's funny, Walter says that he doesn't want GOP representatives to be fighting amongst themselves because that only helps the Democrats. Yet he was the one attacking one of his fellow representatives on Twitter. This is a post that he's since deleted, but luckily it's been screenshot and saved because he was going after Drew Roach for calling out Steve Simon on the floor. So let's remember what Walter Hudson said. He said, "Whether measures are extraordinary is less important than whether they're effective. For instance, today one of our members picked up the mic and yelled at Simon. You didn't know that because the cameras were off and it changed nothing. Barking isn't fighting." So he's the one who's saying that it's so important that the caucus stays unified, but he can't even be the one to do that himself. He's a massive hypocrite, the fact that he wants to think that he can be the one to throw stones, especially when someone is standing up and saying, "Hey, Steve Simon, you're a tyrant." Apparently that's an issue for Walter Hudson.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting point. So by attacking another Republican who is going against the caucus, you're going against the caucus too, because the caucus isn't unified. And it's kind of like circular.
And, also, let's think about what kind of things actually help the Democrats. For example, a bill that would make AI memes illegal, AI political memes illegal. So eliminating your free speech. And, of course, who is that going to be enforced by? Antifa Keith Ellison. And who was the one who was proposing that bill? Who was the one who was championing the bill to illegalize memes and to be able to throw you in prison and be able to fine you up to $10,000? Who was the one championing that bill? Oh, it was Walter Hudson. But who's the ones who are helping the Democrats? Somehow Action for Liberty, when we're the only ones who exposed that bill. So let's go ahead and keep moving here. We'll go on to...
I can't get over the fact that his premise on this whole thing, though, is that you guys are the idiots.
Right.
You're just being duped by
and also, for all the supporters of us, try to keep it straight. You were allowed to support us before when Walter supported us, but now that he's in the legislature, you're not allowed to support him anymore. No decent person would support us, even though he was one of the decent people supporting us before. Right. So let's go ahead and go on to 1910, because you will get to hear... what he describes himself and the other Republican members of the caucus as. It's so good. I don't want to spoil it. Go ahead and play it.
And that's what Minnesota Republicans have to commit ourselves to. Hard work to elect legislative majorities and secure statewide wins as a team of happy warriors who deal with the texture of the battlefield.
That's good.
Hold on.
Happy warriors.
Hold on. Keep going.
Happy warriors. If this video says anything.
Keep going.
As we would prefer to be. And that's not compromise.
Okay, but listen how he doesn't say pass conservative legislation. Did you notice that? He doesn't say that that's their objective. And that's true. Their objective is not to pass conservative legislation. It's to elect a Republican majority.
Right.
Do you see the problem that we have, Walter? Is our objective is not just a Republican majority. It's probably better, maybe it's better to have a Republican majority. It's to pass conservative legislation. That's not your objective. Your objective is to get to the next election.
Right.
Your objective is to get reelected. That's it. You just need to be invited back to the party, and you love being in part of that party nowadays, don't you?
Right, and the fact that he labels himself and these others as happy warriors, if I got anything from this video here, it's that Walter is so happy. It's that Walter is just a joyful person who is ready to spread his love and positivity. And let's just go ahead and end on this video with 1938 there, Dawson, where he says that demands are tyrannical, and he talks about Trump being the leader, and I've got a few things to say on that, so... let's go ahead and play that first, and then we will react on the flip.
Are the currency of tyrants. Service is the currency of citizens. So let's serve each other and work toward electoral victories which will align our state of Minnesota with the national reformation currently being led by President Donald Trump.
Okay, that's good. So, there's just a couple interesting things there. He says that demands are the currency of tyrants. Does he mean demands like cut the cancer of the MNGOP? Does he mean demands like ban anyone affiliated with Action for Liberty from the MNGOP? Are those the kind of demands that he's talking about? Because it certainly seems like those are tyrannical demands from Walter Hudson. So if that's what he's discussing, then I'm in 100% agreement. And I'm glad to hear that he's such a big supporter of President Donald Trump. I wish he was a supporter as long as I've been, because he's talking about how Trump was the leader. Really? Where was Walter Hudson during the Republican primary for president? Oh, that's right. He was staying silent, and he was actually supporting Guantanamo Bay, Ron DeSantis, rather than supporting President Trump. So he wants to unify behind this MAGA agenda that he wasn't really with. He's not a MAGA Republican. He was against Trump, and he was keeping it silent. That's what a lot of these politicians do. They pretend like they are with us 100%. Oh, I'm a liberty fighter. Oh, I love Trump. Really? Where were you when Trump was running? Because, these people were nowhere to be found. And so, the fact that he's using Trump, as we brought up before, what is Trump doing? He is showing what happens, and he's showing that conservatives, the base, is extremely happy when you fight the establishment.
Yes.
Instead of fighting the establishment, Walter is begging people to side with the establishment, side with the Rhino leadership. Do not support groups that are going to demand more out of their leaders. So if you really want to be in line with the MAGA, America First agenda, it's much more closely aligned with Action for Liberty than anything you will get out of Rhino Walter Hudson at this point.
Becky Hack has got it right on the money. Says Walter is a servant, the constituents are his boss. He seems to forget that.
Yes.
That's what this is all about. It's just like he's literally admitted in this video that he serves the caucus, which is 66 other politicians.
Mm-hmm.
That is the high. You heard it from his mouth. That is his higher calling. How dare he go against the caucus? Walter, if your constituents demanded you win against your caucus, would you do it? And I think, first of all, I don't think he wants to answer that question, but I think we know the answer to that question. He's already said his higher calling is serving the caucus. So is the caucus perfect? Do they get it right? Is that it? They're noble 67.
Yep, and you're not allowed to criticize. You're not allowed to criticize the caucus, which sounds an awful lot like a cult. That sounds like a cult.
That's right. It is a cult.
Cultist Walter Hudson. He wants to accuse others of what he is guilty of. So he's obviously a cultist. He's drinking that red Kool-Aid, and it's a little bit sad to see. I wish that he would have been a liberty fighter, but instead, like most politicians, he's chosen to side with the establishment. It doesn't surprise us because, like I said, we know what these politicians are, and that's what more conservatives have become savvy to. These lies aren't working anymore.
Yeah. Well, listen, it's not the first that I've seen get spoiled going up the Capitol, so it's not like I'm surprised by any of these things. I much prefer Walter to be good. I would prefer that he continues to be a liberty warrior because he's, I guess maybe I didn't notice his smugness until it was directed at us. But yeah, he is very smug. And so maybe he did come across that way before and I just was blind to it. But it is what it is. We'll continue doing the same thing, telling the truth as it is. If we ever get anything wrong, by the way, we'll try to correct it. It's not like we bat 1,000, but we tell you what we believe to be true. And this isn't the show that Republican good, Democrat bad. That's Walter. You can have your show. We should just call it the Walter Hudson Republican good, Democrat bad show. Good luck on that one. You have to call out both sides when they're doing the wrong thing, because at the end of the day, we want to protect liberty for the next generation. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And as simple as that, it's like get on the right side of that.
It would be one thing if he had this criticism, but also at the same time was criticizing the rhinos. But he doesn't even do that. He's not even pretending like he's anything but establishment.
Right.
He's obviously siding with the establishment and willing to do whatever it takes to prove that he's one of the good ones for the leadership. He's good for the caucus and whatnot, when he should be good for the grassroots that elected him.
Right. Yeah. All right. We should clip that and call it breaking down Walter's lies or something like that. At this point, you have to just call a spade. He's just lying to you. Like, I know Walter. He's not an idiot. So I know he knows what he's saying is incorrect. So he's lying, right? No other way to look at that, right? Is there another option here? What you're saying is not true. So that means you're lying. Thank you to our great sponsors, Warren Wessel of Keller Williams Realty. Oh, shit. Are we raising money? Oh, my God. I got sponsors. Oh, it is all about money. Jeez. We wouldn't need that to kind of pay for operations in the studio and to promote our message to more people. Oh, sorry, to dupe more people. What am I thinking? You know who doesn't believe any of that crap that Walter just says? Our good friend Warren Wessel at Keller Williams Realty. Call Warren at 612-419-7453 if you're looking to buy a home or sell a home. Also, yeah, Becky Heck said swear jar. Okay, I'll put some money in the swear jar. Brought to you by John Galt Mortgage Company. If you want to buy a home, finance it through John Galt Mortgage. Go to johngaltmortgage.com. Also brought to you by Alpine Cabinetry in St. Cloud, Minnesota. Let's chat a little bit more about this and some things I know in the post show. We'll be live on the post show. If you're not a monthly subscriber, if you want to be duped by me some more in private, become a monthly subscriber. Go to truthhurtsnews.com. You can click on sports on the top, or on Rumble, you can click on join. Thank you to the Rumble rants. We had Gunner for sure twice. O'Bannon, I want to say, was the other one.
Yeah, it was O'Bannon. Yep.
Do we have any others? Okay.
It was two from Gunner.
Thank you so much for the Rumble rants. Thank you guys for the support. We'll be back on Thursday with not Adam Schwartzy. Take care.